Human reproduction is a mysterious thing. After a war, when the population loses a great deal of men as soldiers and cannon fodder, a strange hand tips the balance to give birth to more male children as to balance the race once more. I have been at war for most of my new life, and this showed as most of my children were male. Good for making more Astartes, and also good enough to provide me with sufficient blank daughters for fleet officers and ship captains. My children also had their own children, and thus the cycle repeated. Now I had almost 1 million family members in my Lancefire clan, and the numbers kept growing. Also a good thing, for here in the Galactic Core, there were more than enough ships from my 2 leagues which needed blank captains and officers. After reviewing the available assets, our Admiral Clone Skane, Margos was selected to lead the Balor Lancefire and Orion Lancefire combined fleets, with several escort carriers and 40 drop cruisers at their core, while the Tranquility battleship was to become the new flagship. On the other hand, the local kindred had more than 10,000 warships in their fleets, plus numerous mining barges and transport vessels. Just these 2 small leagues had a controlled volume of 500,000 stars, packed together in a space the size of a mere imperial sector. With a concerted campaign of expansion and xenocide over the nearest Xenos species, we could triple the volume with ease, and become on paper the equal of the Imperium of Man and their million worlds. And then, the Lancefire League might reach the middle leagues in the Votan ranks. The far stronger major leagues had territories 10 or 20 times larger, and were also growing. Of course, there was another reason why the major leagues were considered major, and not overbloated miners ready to burst at the first prick. They also had multiple Votan cores, which gave them a larger tech base and increased coordination and data storage space. However, this I could fix too, with a bit of hard work and mental fatigue. In 2 weeks my league had obtained 10 new planetary cores for our Votans, plus 3 more for the Blade. A fork of her mind was separated into 3 new cores drilled deep under the crust of 3 nearby planets, such that our FTAir transponders could provide direct network links between them. Geomagnetic power would provide energy for all our Votan, as well as power for the reality cages and bastion fields protecting each new hold. While I couldn't provide the Votans with SDC constructors for each of their core, I could adapt the existing Balor and Orion temple fanes to provide a similar function, and have them churn out equipment on an industrial scale, as long as minerals were fed at the other end. It also helped that the kindred were miners first and foremost, and thus eager and happy to go out and mine everything not nailed down, and the nails too. Genetic crucibles were hard at work pumping out new clone skeins, some of them miner templates, the others warriors and ship crew. It wasn't much different than the normal kindred model, except our clones were taller by a head or 2, and quite resistant to warp and emotion drain. For if humanity was to not only survive but prosper, it needed to stop feeding the warp with emotions. I only stayed another week after, to oversee the first incursion into the Snake's lands and the inevitable xenocide. Lady Valane had already pinpointed their weakness, since the Snakes used giant hatcheries for their eggs. An easy enough target, after their main fleet was destroyed by the combined Votan and Halo Crusade fleet. At the Sceptrix home planet, several ships from Votan Tethys arrived as well, examining the tech of the aliens and installing their network servers to provide the new volume with network access. The leagues lack a heavy tank in their arsenal, Lord Lancefire. Once the Crusade fleet departs, ground invasions will become far more difficult without Baneblades or Titans. Margos complained as the fleet gathered for final checks and resupply. I thought for a moment, then nodded. I can provide 500 ionospanes for the core domain. As for Titans, tiny ones. A new house branch with 500 knights, most of them Armiger class. I decided after reviewing my remaining forces. I did gain a lot of new tanks and knights during this crusade, so I wasn't giving away anything critical. Blade knights? The Blade Votan interjected with an eager voice. I made sense though, since without a local forge world, the knights would need tech support from a Votan. They will be called Blade Knights, and be under the command of our Blade Votan. I can create the basic chassis easily, even construct them from adamantium and auramite, but the Blade will want to equip them herself, I continued without losing a beat. 30 of my newest successor chapters with Vulcan gene seed were assigned to the Votan domain, but this time under the command of Margos, since they were of the same gene stock. They were also the most durable and resilient of my blank Astartes, which they would need in the core. The place was rich, but also harsh. So many stars close together radiated plenty of radiation, plus gravity waves and other deadly phenomena like dead zones, black holes and worse. Without incorporating WE fields into every ship or vehicle, they were likely to erode and decay in a single year or less. Margos just nodded, his face stoic but calm. He was given a great deal of power, and even more responsibility. Technically, he will serve as the Lancefire League champion, but in effect he will be the new Great Khal. With 15 new Votan cores under his banner, 6 for Balor and Orion and 3 for the Blade. I hugged the man as we parted, then boarded the Singularity and flew off. 2 months later we emerged out of the core and near Forge Riser, who was also under attack by Chaos. Was it my luck or what? This time I didn't arrive for the rescue with a dozen tiny destroyers, but a whole crusade fleet of 350 capital ships and 2 Blackstone fortresses. My Astartes and Auxilia simply deployed forward to kick the asses out of the Chaos Marines and cultists, while the Crusade fleet crucified the heretics with lances and Nova guns. Only 88 Chaos cruisers and 8 battleships? What was this, the early days of my campaign? Try harder, Chaos. They didn't even manage to summon a great demon, what sorry losers. Purity and Canis growled from my bridge at the view screen, their heartbreak mostly healed. Sister Stern should be fine. They were both quite distracted for a few months, but now Purity had steel in her eyes, much like her mother did. Fury and anger too, but she was still young. Canis licked his companion, then nodded at me with a wise look. Fine, go tear up some heretics. Howling invisible golden pulses, my space wolf streamed through space and began ripping and tearing through a chaos warband with his Catan claws, while Purity cheered him on from the bridge. Bite his head off, Canis. Watch the sword. Yes, take his arm first. Now the neck. Yay. My etheric detector pinged gently, as with each kill Purity was gaining slightly more psychic strength. Soon enough, I should send her to Terra. Janice and the Emperor should know what to do. The Chaos fleet tried to scatter and escape to the warp, but I was feeling merciful today. They got the Emperor's mercy. Forge World Riser is the most advanced planet in the galaxy in regards to plasma technology, with several templates and patterns not even known on Mars and other Forge worlds. Some of this is because the knowledge wasn't completely lost, even after the Age of Strife. There are also a pair of STCs hidden deep in the main central machine temple, one very damaged and one less so. There is also an Arc Mechanicus in orbit among the Basilicone Astra fleet, but that's different. Blade is dealing with that part. I am a good guy though, so I repaired the huge constructors to their prime, then updated them with our best Texosist sigils and hexagrammic wards, which have become even stronger lately, by studying Votan barrier tech and the original Federation STC for Psi-Tech, which did contain schematics for Psi Titans, Psi-Lancers and even Aegis shields and armor, plus thousands of various templates usable by navigators, silent sisters and actual psychers. There were also hundreds of things mostly used only by the Officio Assassinorum or the Inquisition, but these were production templates, not cobbled up or jury-rigged devices like most Rosettas and their faith shield. Walking beside the fabricated general of this Forge world, and followed by a conclave of respected magi and other Mechanicus clades, we toured the workshops and fabrication lines, repairing old tech, upgrading newer automated systems and cogitators, the whole deal. I had a big debt to repay to Forge Riser, as they were the ones to give me my first battlecruiser, and plenty of generous deals like 100 Katakan regiments and megatons of war equipment. It is also a joy to see damaged or even destroyed Titans kept as relics, rise up and walk again. Then hundreds of knights, probably kept secret by Forge Riser in case of another internal strife like the Horus Heresy. They were kept in stasis, so were kinda alright, but a few upgrades never hurt. Especially not when armed with the new plasma_decimator created by the Blade AI, which was eerily similar to the one Archmago's Cowl presented as a special and unique singular plasma decimator. Its machine spirit data shackles and enhanced containment fields allow this decimator to generate even more lethal volumes of energy than a simple example of such a weapon. That new decimator weapon was proudly named Cowl's Wrath in the honor of its creator, so the Blade called hers the Blade Decimator. For their other hand, the Blade created or adapted a mecha-sized plasma_blade, able to slice through most armor or buildings with terrifying ease. By the blood of the machine god. To see the holy plasma form into a stable blade with my own eyes. This is the greatest miracle I have ever witnessed. The fabricator gushed in praise, hugging me tight, and then raising me up like a prodigy child who just won the Nobel Prize for Physics. I could have continued uplifting the Forge world even more, when a dozen Imperial ships entered the riser system, coming from Sol system. I ignored the company of Adeptus Custodes, the pair of Martian arcs or the Grey Knight's strike cruiser. For the largest ship, a Glory-class superdreadnought carried both my wife and my daughter. My Rose and little Janice. As soon as my dimensional sense covered them, Janice drew a blue rune in midair, almost blocking my tesseract. Not yet as strong as Sister Stern, but getting close. He sees us, Mother. And I can't block him. Janice spoke in vague disappointment. Have fun, Canis, I said gently as my wolf mewed for permission. Then he was gone in a flash, and wrestled with Janice like he did with his pups. More invaders, Lord Lancefire? The fabricator asked in slight worry, while tracing my gaze towards the sky. Well, they weren't Chaos Marines this time, but probably even more dangerous. Mars ships, plus some Custodes. I answered diplomatically. They may be after the Imperial tithe. I may have neglected my payments, for a century or two. The fabricator whispered in a secretive tone. I nodded slowly. It was possible to. The Imperium was not the most prompt tax collector, but when they did, they came with enough firepower to level a planet. But in this case, the fabricator wasn't exactly right. A punishment fleet would have contained 1,000 ships, not just 12. Forge Riser already had about 800 system corvettes plus their strong Arc Mechanicus capital ships. No, this fleet was intended to rescue Forge Riser from the Chaos invasion, if I wasn't here already. The Imperator Clarita's superdreadnought had enough shields and firepower in those 40 kilometers of overachieving majesty to face 8 Chaos battleships of 8 kilometers. The Mars Forge arcs were likely intended to repair Forge Riser after the battle, again if I wasn't here, but not my Rose. The Emperor sent my wife specifically to deal with me. He knew I would arrive here sooner or later. As for Janice, I guess she wanted to see Canis again. I'll deal with the Imperials. Your forge is safe with me around. I told the fabricator, then vanished in my tesseract labyrinth and emerged in front of Rose, holding a giant bouquet of roses and a bottle of pink wine in my hands. A local brand called Stella Rosa, by coincidence. My dear Rose, you look as pretty as a flower, I said first, taking advantage of the surprise element. Pef, you're still an idiot. And lucky I warned the Custodes not to shoot you, if you do something stupid like breaching the Emperor's own flagship. My wife yelled in anger, and nodded gratefully towards a shield captain with auramite armor. I shrugged, pretty much unconcerned. The Custodes would live to regret shooting me, with an enlarged arsehole after I shoved my foot there. Janice seems fine. Learning more runes and spells too. I changed the subject while embracing my wife. Rose punched me in the chest, probably a death sentence for any non-blank not wearing a null box as their chest plate. She was still an alpha psyker, the kind to level down a continent if she tried. Or if she waved her arms too much. Psyker powers were kinda random. Well, the Forge world isn't going anywhere, I guess. I can extract the unpaid tithe tomorrow. Let's catch up in my room, husband. My Rose spoke in a more enticing tone, promising a long interrogation session, in her bed. Hey, Dad. Bye, Dad, Janice yelled while riding Canis like a war rhino, passing through the room and then through a wall like it was nothing. Piskers, what can you do? This place was strange, so I learned to ignore such things. The riding pair appeared on my ship and kidnapped Purity for their joyride, then went on to jump ships and moons in a great tour of the riser system. Purity was howling louder than both of the others, so they seemed to have fun. In a minute, Rose and I tasted the wine, then smelled the roses. Then we jumped in the bed, and the bed jumped on the ceiling, 50 meters up. Why did the Emperor build his ship with such high ceilings? No idea, ask him. I was busy. Much later, Rose and I returned to her study so I could deliver my report on the Halo Crusade. This matches well with the data I received from the Inquisition. Always the hero, Pef Lancefire. My wife noted in a more relaxed voice. I did break 100 or so Imperial laws. I added in a teasing voice. Rose glared at me for a second, letting me know she was well aware. The Emperor knows and doesn't care. Sometimes I get the impression he doesn't care at all about the Imperium. I nodded slowly. Of course he doesn't. This Imperium is the opposite of what he wanted. A religious society that worships him as a god? Monarchia was burned to the ground for exactly the same thing. And now, Lorga's book was the central tenet of the imperial faith. The Emperor cares about humanity greatly. He endured the torment of the Golden Throne to keep everyone safe. Well, almost safe. I explained with a bit of warning in my voice. The Custodes captain recording the interview nodded minutely at my words. Rose glanced at the Custodes in surprise. I get the feeling there is a larger story here that I am unaware of. I shrugged and leaned back on the sofa. If the Emperor wanted to be treated as a god, there would have been plenty of time to create a religion in the past 100,000 years. Much easier as well, when humanity was locked on a single planet before we invented space flight. And yet, the imperial faith appeared only after he laid on the Golden Throne. I see. Rose mused with another glance at the Custodes. She still didn't realize the problem, as if a galaxy-wide religion could spread so far and wide without a real god at its core. The Astronomicon still burns, my dear. A fragment of the Emperor's soul remains in the warp, keeping humanity safe even now. That is what psychers and navigators see when they open their soul. They see the God Emperor of mankind, using the light of his soul to guide humanity. The Custodes over here sees the man, their friend and liege and the ruler of man. What do you see? I asked, a bit rhetorical. Rose froze for a moment. I think I saw both. But the Emperor masked my vision, showing me only a glowing golden armor, taller than the Primarchs. He's not kissing Janice with a golden helmet over his mouth, that's for sure, I said with a gentle laugh. Pef Lancefire. The Custodes captain growled at me, sounding outraged. Right, nobilia decorum and all that. Surely, a father and a mother can discuss what their daughter is doing and with whom. At least, this father can. I countered while tapping my chest. The Custodes glared at me still, when Janice and my wolf phased through the walls and appeared in the room. Did you get the tech, father? My daughter asked in an official tone. The Omnicopeia has costed me dearly. Sister Stern remained in the maelstrom, battling billions of demons while the fleet retreated with the prize, I said in a less pleased voice, and took out the STC cube from my dimensional pocket. There were still hundreds of templates and fabrication methods in there which we didn't manage to unlock, either because we lacked the correct codes or the psychic power and knowledge. My librarians were low-level psychers, not planet crushers like these two. Janice smiled and placed a magic glove on her left hand, then touched the STC cube with her eyes closed. Blue runes and sigils lit up the air, covering the cube with wards and whatever other psyker spells. You've read half of the templates already? She asked in mild surprise as her eyes opened. There must be more in there we didn't find. I did what I could, but there's been only 2 months. STCs are rather advanced tech anyways, and I lack psyker powers for this one. I complained while Rose gasped in surprise. Despite being the head of the Imperial Inquisition, my wife seemed to be kept in the dark about a lot of things. You've read too much then, father. I would normally execute anyone who gained so much knowledge. Janice countered with a displeased voice. Canis rose to his feet and growled, making Janice shake her head and smile. It's fine, Canis. Your Black Alpha is not in trouble. As long as he doesn't spread this tech around. She added with a pointed glance right at me. Hey, I wasn't about to go distribute sci-tech all over. My blank librarians and silent sisters, maybe a few of my navigators. Barely a few thousand people. I get your point, Janice. I did execute 24 inquisitors at Forge World Idumea, who were also dealing with warp tech. Your brother Solitus is now the new fabricator colonel, in charge of making the Forge repent and produce Iron Core regiments to fight against the enemies of humanity. I offered in a peaceful voice, we need many more blanks, father. The humanity is experiencing a psychic awakening, with 1 billion psychers appearing all over the Imperium. The Forge worlds are turning as many as they can into electro-priests, but there aren't enough Forge worlds anyways, Janice said with a concerned voice. Well, I knew the Imperium was fucked. That's why I worked so hard to find the Primarchs and awaken the Emperor. It seemed it wasn't enough. Clone skeins with dimmed emotions would also help. The Votan Leagues and the Tau are managing such things much easier. Indoctrination too, I guess. I offered with a careless voice. I did my fucking duty every day, but one man couldn't repopulate humanity with blanks by himself. The Thalax cyborgs you copied from the Leagues? Mars is already fuming from that outrageous gift. And I heard Forge Lucius did the same. Were you trying to get more from Forge Riser as well? Janice asked with mild curiosity. I was pretty sure the fabricator of Riser would give me his unborn children too if I asked. 1 million cyborg suits would barely balance the scales for what his Forge already received. And I wasn't done either. One does not ask for gifts, my beloved daughter. If Forge Riser wants to repay my generous donations to the cult Mechanicus, they are free to do so. Ships would be welcome too, I said with a teasing voice. Canis walked at my side and placed his giant head on my knee, so I patted his head as a reward. Black Alpha? Well, wolves were pack animals, and I did rule my pack like an alpha wolf would. Why did he call me black though? Forge Riser will not have anything to gift, father. The Mars priests are determined to take everything of value as their tithe. Janice warned me as she sat beside her mother and hugged her side. They looked like sisters, although Rose was older and far more tired. Her eyes had wrinkles, and those wrinkles had their own wrinkles. That's not a problem. I will deal with the priests from Mars and pay the tithe for Riser instead. I have become quite rich since my early days, roaming the stars with a single light cruiser. I countered with a sneaky smile. A single star contained enormous quantities of minerals if properly mined out and the gases fused into metals. The Orion League was small and could barely mine a star once a decade, but those minerals possibly equaled what the entire Imperium mined in the same decade. And I received 500 years' worth of metals for my hard week of creating new data cores. I could construct my fleet from gold only, and barely make a dent in my reserves. Larger leagues had more particle excavators and larger territories, and could mine a star in a year or less. They didn't do much with those metals, since the Votan AI were kinda broken, but there was more wealth in those leagues than the entire Imperium could mine out in 1,000,000 years. Paying the tithe for Forge Riser, even with penalties for 200 years of neglect, wouldn't even scratch my dimensional deposit. I could create 1,000 Forge worlds like Metallica, also placed on planets made of metal, and it wouldn't beggar me. So I will. I was quite rich indeed. The Archmagos priest of Mars glared at me with his Cognis optical lenses. Then a mech dendrite snaked forward and grabbed the data slate in my hand, and hid it under his red robes. Your valuable donation has been logged and filed with the Holy Sanctus Cogitator Matrix, Pef Lancefire. Now, about the gene seed. The Archmagos continued in a greedy tone. I frowned for a second. I can provide 10 liters of original blood plasma originated from Primax Khan and Vulcan. And I would also urge the Holy Forge of Mars from abstaining from investigating or reproducing Blood Angels gene seed, or Space Wolves too for that matter. There are psychic components in there which would only produce perturbations in the Primaris Space Marines program. Isn't that your own gene seed, Pef Lancefire? Are you so dismissive of the Omnissiah's creation? The other Magus at the side asked curious. He was a Magus biologist, and obviously involved with the creation of the Primaris Marines in some manner. I am a psychic blank, Magus. The etheric echoes present in my gene seed have simply given me a fever and a few hours of great thirst. Regular humans would experience that 1,000 times worse, and psychers 40,000 times. Which is why all blood angels descend into black rage and red thirst, becoming bloodthirsty berserkers, and only a handful ever recover. And the space wolves are much the same, but with helix canis urges and transformations. I explained patiently. The two tech priests glanced at each other, and a torrent of Benharic and tech lingua slang burst from their vox casters. They wonder how much do you know, Lord Captain? And if you have more holy STCs hidden somewhere. The Blade AI translated for me in my mind. Of course they would wonder. I did have plenty of secrets, after all. Pef Lancefire, the tithe imposed on Forge Riser would balance at the 2 arcs holds filled with high-grade equipment and rare minerals. Is your house so rich as to despoil the dynasty's trader ships of valuable equipment, so to pay a small debt to this Forge world? The first Archmagos asked a minute later. I am quite rich, yes. But instead of giving you objects I select at random, why don't you compile a list of materials or equipment that Mars will consider useful? Adamantium, perhaps? Maybe Blackstone? Xenotech? Alien bioforms? Gold and silver even. I proposed with a tiny smirk. In less than an hour the two tech priests filled the wall screen with technologies and rare elements that would be useful for their forge. Uranium, plutonium, iridium and osmium were listed at the top, followed by gold and platinum, then germanium, titanium and adamantium. So I took out an ingot of auramite, just to test a theory. I mean, I also knew the requirements for auramite fusion, which made up 3/4 of the list. I can provide some auramite directly. I managed to say, before the Archmagos snatched the ingot and examined it with surprised blue bionic eyes. Purity 99.987%. Almost as good as the Adeptus Custodes use for their battleplate and vehicles. But even so, worth an entire Baneblade, for a single ingot. You have more? The Archmagos asked in a more polite voice, after examining the ingot with his scanning tools. An ingot had about 4 kilograms, so I grinned a bit too wide. Some things were a bit too easy to achieve. I have 1,000 such ingots with me, thus 40,000 kilograms. But in a decade, I could obtain 100 times this amount, maybe a bit more. I was a bit away from my trading routes for a while, thus my contacts may have gone cold, I said with a casual voice. These guys were smart, so they would understand the hint about cold trade, or the highly illegal trade deals with Xenos or worse kinds. The Archmagos waved his mech dendrite at the trade screen, changing the tithe to remove the non-fissionable materials, and adding 13 megatons of Blackstone instead. This will suffice for the tithe of Forge Riser then, Pef Lancefire. As for the holy templates on the data slate, the Fabricator General of the Imperium will decide a proper gift. Almost certainly, the gift will include the Aptus non-grade tithe for your worlds and the forges in your fringe domain. I would hope so. The Geller ramparts alone would increase the security of the forge worlds and ships by 2 orders of magnitude. The reality cage even more. Plasma guns should help too, since my templates were at least as good as Forge Riser could make. Lord Captain, the Phobos grade machine spirit requests an upgrade to Federation grade, when you are able. The blade whispered in my mind. Excellent news, honored tech priests. Now, should we tour the ship and see where my repair aura can be of use? I was told many machines just heal and get better in my presence. I offered in a generous voice, The holds of the Mechonicus ships filled by miracle with precious metals and minerals, likely enough to construct a dozen capital ships and power their fusion reactors. The Margus biologist ignored me, and ran off with the 2 blood canisters containing Primarch gene seed. The Archmagos just stared at me for a minute, then nodded slowly. Let's start with the broken lance battery, rogue trader. We have failed all rituals to appease the machine spirit for 8,000 years, so there isn't much to lose if you fail as well. Soon after, I scanned the partially melted and fused turret with my expert eyes. Unless the repair crew became orcs, this lance would not fire ever again, no matter how many rituals and gallons of holy oil they poured on the fused cables and evaporated power links. Holding my left hand out front, I used the Necron orb in my inventory to begin repairs, while my Breath of Gods provided the missing components and minerals. In a single minute, the lance weapon lit up at full health and thanked me, especially after the new targeting protocols were installed. My single mechadendrite plugged into the Cognos data port to install a set of hex wards, and then clean up a few data demons hiding in the old chips. Welcome to 98% hit rate, Godbane Lance. May you fry the Xenos and demons for many years to come. Your designation as emissary of Omnissiah is now confirmed, Lord Lancefire. Mars will propose your house as a nominee to Nobilite Primaris status. The vote in the Imperial Senate is not a certain achievement, however, considering how many enemies you have. The Archmagos spoke in a better mood, and sprinkled me with holy incense. My house did receive a Nobilite Secundus upgrade only a century ago. We even had a spire on Terra, mostly used for receiving noble insults from other houses. It was sometimes distant and out of my mind, the Imperium of Man being a feudal society ruled by an emperor and his nobles. Well, they shouldn't expect me to be like them, those other nobles. And especially not the Navis Nobilite, or the Navigator houses. Those sucked even worse. The tour took a bit longer than I expected now, since an Arch Mechonicus older than 10 millennia did have a lot of problems to fix. As we entered the bridge, where no regular human has been in its entire existence, the Ark's machine spirit lit all its screens to proudly show most of its systems glowing bright green, with ready and operational tags on most of them. There were 2 systems showing only yellow. The first was the original chronometric wave motion beam cannon, for which I had no schematic or idea what to fix. Cleaning the dings and oil stains helped a little at least, as was replacing missing cables. The other was the manifold tachyonic data link, which I managed to restart by cleaning up the nest of data demons, but also had little idea how it worked. Something about faster than light signals, but that was not saying much. Damn Federation tech was so far ahead it seemed like magic sometimes. Are you happy now, machine spirit? I asked out loud, using the regular low Gothic used everywhere in the Imperium. The main holy screen merged its little screens into a single one, and a golem of stone appeared in front of me. We are stone and we endure, Pef Lancefire. Now our burden is much easier. The golem spoke in return, but in High Gothic, then split off into regular command screens. The entire bridge crew turned to stare at me. What? They already knew machines had spirits, right? Although this one was also sapient, as proven by its ability to speak. The machine god spoke. The crew yelled in religious frenzy, then bowed low towards the main screen. It's your Arch Mechonicus, not the whole machine god. It was badly damaged and maintained though, but now it is better. Treat it well, I urged the tech priests and acolytes, blaring data hymns and machine canticles from all their vox ports. A thin but piercing audio signal emerged from the Archmagos, and the muttering stopped, out loud at least. We must make haste back to Holy Mars now, Lord Lancefire. Your great favor is forever logged in our data cortex. I waved goodbye, then returned to the giant Glory-class superdreadnought, to attempt the same feat. Woo! Worf! Canis greeted me and sniffed out loud. I must smell like a tank engine right now. Oh well. A bit of oil didn't bother me much, even if covered in it. Much less than blood, for example. I was walking the decks of the Claritas, with a huge wolf at my left and a Psyker daughter floating on the other side. Janice dismissed her Custodes guard with a single phrase. "We are Lancefires, shield captain. You wouldn't be worried to walk beside another Custodes, right?" The man sighed a bit too loud, but only nodded. "Your mother doesn't get the same treatment though," I noted as I reached the only Gela generatorium on the giant ship. Sure, the thing was large as well, and armored with a meter of adamantium on all sides, but it was still a single point of failure. The Emperor was still disregarding demons as mere nuisances, probably because the same demons simply burned to ash in his presence. A pair of Custodes guarding the Gela field Amita nodded at Janice, and one of them even uttered Adepta Tertia. In a respectful voice. Canis and I were ignored as irrelevant. Then Janice waved a hand and locked the vault door behind us. "I was told you have managed to unseal your first hermetic core?" she asked while measuring me with dissecting eyes. "How?" I asked in surprise. "Right, you were there when the Emperor operated on me," I realized a bit later. Hermetic transdimensional nodes, to be released from their seal upon encountering a specific danger or artifact activation. We also installed bionic organs. The heart furnace has already saved your life a few times, while the extra brain lobe aids to manage temporal shifts and the T-engine's probability vectors. And the normal Astartes cooperation too, I would guess, Janice said while hugging Canis and scratching his chin. "Checking on the human experiment now? How filial of you," I muttered while placing my hand on the inner wall to transmute it into a meter of auramite instead. A bit draining on my mental reserves, but nothing like a complex machine or a planetary data core. "I also have 2 hermetic cores and a heart furnace. Just in case," he said. Janice spoke in a less pleased voice. I sighed out loud, then searched my inventory to find another transdimensional beamer pistol, disguised as a fancy combi bolter gun instead. Then I loaded a pair of Darkstar rounds I got from a certain Votan, and a magazine of Kraken rounds to fill the rest. Dual use, prison or soul death. Primac class enemies, or higher, I whispered as Canis drew away in wary manner. Janice glanced between my wolf and the gun, before taking it and examining it with glowing blue eyes. Pisca bullshit. Convenient, but still bullshit. The transdimensional pocket will not contain a great demon for long, but it should work against a Catan shard. As for the death rounds, I may shoot Evrain once, just for laughs. She keeps bothering Rabute and Sanguinius for some reason. My daughter mused in a thoughtful voice. Rabute I understand, but Sanguinius? Really? I asked, a bit surprised at the mundane gossip. What? I can understand pretty angel Sanguinius, but grim robot Rabute, really? My daughter countered in outrage. We both stared at each other for a moment, then burst out laughing. I'm glad you found a boy eventually, even if he's not a navigator. You aimed pretty high, I said with a tiny smirk. Janice blushed a little, then grabbed Canis again as a comfort pillow. He is quite difficult. And always dreams of better days, while the Imperium crashes around us. I held out an obsidian card, and leaned back on the impregnable auramite wall. When you need rescue, call me. I'll do what I can. So you also know. Terra is gone. It hasn't happened yet, but it's a matter of short years now. Maybe a decade, Janice said in a sad voice, while floating the blackstone-rimmed card into her hand, an impossible feat inside a Gela field, not to mention one locked with auramite walls. The failsafe in the Golden Throne? I asked a bit randomly. I knew of some kind of doomsday weapon meant to destroy Terra in case the throne failed. I hope we can repair that, with your Sci-Tech STC. But even then, something worse happens. My vision ends when a new eye opens, glowing with cold white light. One way or another, the Imperium falls, Janice said in a pained voice. I was the opposite of an expert in Pisca powers, but that seemed to me exactly like the light of the Astronomicon. But somehow manifesting in real space. Well, take 10,000 years of prayers and the projection of an illumination beacon into the warp which can be seen in most of the galaxy. I had to move Suta 1,000 light-years away to avoid constant Tyrannid fleets, plus orcs and Eldar raiders. And poor Suta only has a laser pointer beacon, not a lighthouse like Terra. I answered with a careless shrug. The Astronomicon? It does fit the place, but Magnus is not strong enough. Janice spoke with obvious disbelief. I never said it would be Magnus. I kicked his red eye myself back on Fenris. You were there as well. I commented with a wry voice. I remember, Father. Magnus, Angron, and Lorga, and Pef Lancefire waiting for them, like a lion preying on lambs. The lion still hates you for stealing his glory and saving the space wolves, Janice whispered while Canis licked her hand. If I failed at Cadia, the Eye of Terror would have broken free, and split the galaxy in two. Cicatrix maledictum. I can always punch another god in the eye, if the Emperor wants me to. I mused, mostly to myself. But I doubt he will ask. The Emperor kept his own secrets, and not even Janice was privy to all of them. How can you be so calm? The Imperium will fall. Everything will get burned or distorted. We are already exporting trillions of people every day, and is not enough, Janice yelled in my face. Our home is the fringe, Janice Lancefire. Save what you can, the ancient books and art at least. As for humanity, they will adapt or die. Blanks will be fine, no matter what comes. I observed in a colder voice. Blanks. I see it now. You were preparing for this before I was born. Helping the forges, for they carry the knowledge we will need to rebuild. And Adam knew as well. No wonder you're so similar. Janice growled as a cold aura covered her. Canis growled in return, his golden aura countering Janice almost perfectly. Whoa. My wolf spoke, the meaning clear in my mind. Wolf time. Oh well. I knew a certain Necron who will want tickets to the End of Times light show. It was time to trade again.